Hello everyone, my name is Joe Parks and today I'd like to talk with you about running the virtual machines that we've created for our Java development environment for both the introductory and advanced Java classes. Before I get to that, if you wish, you may certainly install the development tools on your own machine. There are two development environments that you may want to consider, or you can do both of them. One is a product called IntelliJ by JetBrains. You can go to jetbrains.com, and if you go down to the bottom of their web page, get your student pack, you can click here, and it has instructions for registering as a student and getting a free student account. And in this class, we will be using the Ultimate Edition of the IntelliJ IDE. So you can certainly do that. You can also use Eclipse. To use Eclipse, you go to eclipse.org. Let me get back to the home there. And you can click on other package downloads, and I recommend the Eclipse IDE for Java EE developers. If you do decide to go with Eclipse, you will want to update it to support Java FX, and that involves adding the EFX Clips package or software to Eclipse, which is again free. And the instructions for how to do that are on this wiki at eclipse.org. Just to show you that very quickly, here are the instructions. They are for an earlier version of Eclipse, but it's really okay. The installation is the same. And so it walks you through exactly how to install that plugin for Eclipse. Now this video will be primarily on using the virtual machines, and you've been given access, look at your Blackboard course, you've been given access to those machines through some way, and it will be probably about a 5 GB zip file that you'll want to download and expand. There are actually two very closely related virtual machines. You will be using the online one, and I'll talk about the difference between the online one and the campus one in a bit, but they are very minor and don't affect the behavior of the machine. It's just a little bit of activation for the IntelliJ IDE from JetBrains that you have to go through for the online one. These are pre-built virtual machines. Now once you expand the zip file that you download, it expands to around 10 gigabytes, and as you write programs it may grow a little bit more after that. To run these virtual machines, you will need to download a free piece of software from VMware, the VMware Player. And so we will start there, and we will open a virtual machine. My virtual machine happened to be expanded into C users, JParks, my documents, virtual machines, and again we are going to be using the online, and I will tell VMware Workstation to open this virtual machine configuration file for the online version. That's what you'll use whether you are whenever you're working at home, no matter if you're taking a seated class or an online class. I will open that, and there you'll see the virtual machine show up. And before we get to opening it, let's just look at some of the options. This virtual machine is configured with 4 GB of memory. If you have more than 8 on your host machine, you may want to expand that, but see if you get decent performance out of the 4 gig first. If you have 8 GB on your host, be very careful about expanding it. It has one processor. If you have a quad-core processor, you may want to expand that to 2. That will probably help performance. There are other options, notably if you're really big into virtual machines, you can share folders with your host, but I won't be getting into that. These are really very basic virtual machines, and I want to thank one of my colleagues, Chris James, for spinning up the base operating systems for us. So we will click Play Virtual Machine, and it takes a little while to boot up, so I will let that happen and come. Okay, our virtual machine is finally booted up, and you can see the first is the login screen. These machines have one user account that's called student, and the password for the student account is password, P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D, all lowercase, horribly insecure, but whoever gets here has already broken into your host machine. The root password for these machines is also password, lowercase, P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D, same thing. And before we get to the good stuff, let's just show some of the auxiliary stuff that are on these machines. There is a Firefox web browser, which I can use to get to Blackboard. And I will just go into one of the 151 courses, but finally it comes up, and I can open PDF files. Stuff in here that doesn't apply to us. I can also open spreadsheets with LibreOffice. And that's a schedule from an earlier course. And in a moment we'll see that I can open charts, although they don't work as well in LibreOffice. However, keep in mind that you still have your host machine. You can run Blackboard or link up to Blackboard from there. These LibreOffice is on here mostly as something to get over the humps in Blackboard, and you can submit things from here if you wish. But you can use Blackboard. LibreOffice is installed. You can look at charts. You can look at Word documents, and so forth. So that's Firefox. Now, here is Eclipse, and if you double click on that, it will come up just fine. There's the default workspace for Eclipse, and there are tutorials on Eclipse for how to create projects and so forth. I'm not going to be getting into that in this tutorial. And I can go to Workbench, and there we have Eclipse. I can also run IntelliJ, and this is the one difference between the online version and the campus version. The online version has not been activated, so if you want to use IntelliJ at home, you'll have to register for that JetBrains account, and the first time it comes up, you'll enter your JetBrains account, whatever your ID is, and that will activate it. And it takes a while to come up. The first time IntelliJ comes up and you create a project, you will have to do a slight bit of configuration, and that is when you go to create your first Java project, you'll notice the project SDK is not filled in here. So you'll want to click New, the JDK, and the JDK is installed on these virtual machines in User, Java, and all of these are the same JDK. Default and latest are just soft links to this JDK. We will just pick default for funds. And now you can see that the JDK and its version and everything are filled in. You'll only have to do that for the first project you create. And after that, you can use IntelliJ normally. And again, there are a lot of tutorials for how to use IntelliJ. I'm not going to be getting into that on this video. There is one more thing I want to talk about, and that is moving files between the virtual machine and your host machine. Drag and drop work. And so here on my host desktop, I've created a folder. And if I expand that folder, there it is. You'll see that there's nothing in it at the moment. On my virtual machine, I can also create a folder. I'll just right click and say create folder, and I'll call this shared with host. And I can create a document here, an empty file from guest, and I can edit it with a simple editor. Say this is from the guest. I will save it, exit from there, and I can drag that file over into my folder on my host. And if I open that up from the host, probably not Notepad but WordPad, that's because the end of line conventions for Windows and the Unix-based operating systems are different. But you can see that file is opened on my host now. I'll get rid of that, and on my host, I will create a new text file. I'll call it from host, and on just using Notepad on my host machine, I'll save that and get out of Notepad. And now on my host machine, I can drag that file over onto my guest and edit editor. And there is my text file on my host machine. This is one way you could use to drag programs back and forth if you wanted to, if you had something on the host and wanted it on the guest or vice versa, or if you wanted to take your Java source files from your guest machine over to the host before you zip them up for submission. So that's a very quick introduction to the virtual machines we've defined. Hope this helps in some of the configuration battles you've fought in the past for running various development environments. We don't care if you use IntelliJ or Eclipse. Just make sure that your submissions are in the form that your instructor specifies. So, hope this helps. Be sure to ask questions and make comments. Thanks very much. Bye.